Well, it's Thursday and we welcome Mary Holm in with some thoughts on personal finances. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Jesse.
And you got some good news for mortgage holders this week.
I was just reading through some financial stuff as you do, or maybe you don't. And I sort of noticed that there were 3 different stories to do with mortgages that were all good news. And I thought, well, about time we had some good news on the financial front. So the first one is fairly obvious, the first item, which was that the Reserve Bank once again cut the official cash rate down to 2.25 this time. And that was the 8th cut since May 2023. So over that time, that tends to trickle down, although sometimes there are bigger jumps than others. But it's interesting to think now that back in May, 2.5 years ago, it was 5.5%, and it's now 2.25, which is half. And that's quite an astonishing change over a fairly short time, really. Which tends to get translated into lower mortgage rates for people. Although this time the fixed mortgage rates are not expected to drop because apparently the banks and the lenders already knew this cut was almost certainly going to come, and so they'd already priced it into their mortgages. There's some scepticism about that. Some people say that that's the bank's excuse for not lowering the rates, but when you have a look at it, actually, 2 years ago, the fixed rates were around 7.5, and they're now around 4.5 to 5. So they have come down about as much as the official cash rates come down. The official cash rate is always lower than the mortgages.
That's how banks make money, right?
Yes. But they have basically come down about as far as the official cash rates come down over the last 2 or 3 years, with the big drops going on. In the meantime, floating mortgage rates are, though, still coming down. And that's quite interesting because in recent years, usually the floating rates are a fair bit higher than the fixed, but they might tend to be edging a bit closer to the fixed, I think.
Will they always be higher?
No, not necessarily. In fact, I think I sent you in this graph, which a Reserve Bank graph, which shows that there have been periods in the last, this is from 2004, there have been some periods when around 2010 to 2015, there were periods when the floating rates were lower than some of the fixed rates. So they're not necessarily always higher. I think there's a whole lot of factors that go into that. But the floating rates are tending to come down. And what's more, people on fixed rates, the fixed rates might not be dropping now, but people will still be stuck on one that was a 1 or 2 year rate, and so their mortgage rate drop might be yet to come when their term ends, if you see what I mean. There's one particular quote I saw on interest.co.nz, David Chaston, and I thought, gosh, he makes a really good point about floating rates. He said, if you're an existing customer with a floating rate, you can ask your bank to apply the rate reduction sooner than the effective date they've told you. He says, you can say to the bank, hey, I see that rates are coming down in a couple of months. I want my rate to come down now. And what Chaston says is that the delay is only because the banks are under an obligation to give advance notice of a change. So they're legally obliged to tell people this is going to change. But as he said, that's only really needed when they're going to raise rates. So they're saying to Jesse, hey, your mortgage is going to go up in a couple of months, so you've got a bit of time to adjust. But nobody needs warning.
No one's going to complain, no.
when the rates are going down. So
that's a great tip.
I thought it was. He said if a new client came along, they would get the new lower rate immediately. So he's saying, hey, if you've got a floating mortgage, go to your bank or other lender right now and say, I want the lower rate from now. And he reckons they should give it to you. So that's something for some people to, because if you get a month or two of lower rates, it's all, a meal out or something.
Yeah.
Now, the second of the three pieces of good news about mortgages was that fewer people are behind on mortgage payments than were before. So, we've gone through some tough economic times in the last 2 or 3 years. And, well, since COVID, really, things have been up and down and all over the place, and people have been struggling. And quite a few people have got behind on their mortgage payments, which is a horrible situation to be in. But what I read the other day was, even though back in March we were on an 8-year high on the number of people behind on their payments, we're now down to nearly a 2-year low. So a lot of people from between March and now have caught up and got ahead on their mortgage payments.
We seem to escape that peak in interest rates without a flurry of mortgagee sales. At least there wasn't much covered in the media, was there?
That's
you
right.
didn't get the sense that people were desperate and giving up
That's
and
a good
selling
point.
at a huge... I mean, people are selling at a bit of a loss, I suppose, but it doesn't sound like they're under as much pressure as you might have expected them to be.
No, I know. That's a really good point. I'm sure, yes, people who have been forced to sell in recent times, but only if they bought back at the peak of the house prices, which was 3 years ago, I think, round about then. But you're quite right. People were sort of talking, mortgagee sales are going to start happening, and we haven't really heard about that, have we? So people have obviously got a bit behind with their mortgages, but they're coming right.
As I think you've said, the bank generally tries to help you avoid a mortgagee sale. We do tend to villainise or demonise the banks, but it's sort of in their interests to
I think so.
keep you above water.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that they're good people, although perhaps a few of them are, but that it's quite a lot of hassle and negativity around mortgagee sales where people are forced to sell their house because they haven't been making the payments. So I think that the banks are, pretty willing to bend over backwards if they can see that you're really trying and that you're, perhaps suspending your principal payments and paying interest only, or even paying only half the interest for a while, or even having a holiday and not paying at all. I think they look at your whole financial situation, and if things are likely to get better, they give people a chance. And this news is saying that a lot fewer people are behind on their mortgage payments than were before. So that was terrific.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of news, I saw economist Cameron Bagri was saying that a lot of people are doing what you and I have talked about in the past. When mortgage interest rates drop, you don't say, hey, that's great, I'm going to pay less on my mortgage. You go to the lender and say, no, I want to keep my payments at the old level, and therefore you pay off the loan sooner.
Yeah, I call it pulling a Mary.
Yes. Yeah, well, maybe people have been listening to us, Jesse.
Yeah.
Look, maybe 3 of them have. But ANZ apparently said that more than 40% of home loan customers are now ahead on their payments by 6 months or more. So they're not just a little bit ahead, they're getting well ahead on their payments, and 40%, that's I thought, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
People are taking advantage of the fact that mortgage interest rates are falling by getting ahead.
The government, we're hoping they start feeling a little bit flush, right?
Yeah.
Feel like they've got a bit of spare money in their pocket and start going out a bit more, buying a few more things.
And the whole economy will start bubbling a bit more.
Yeah.
I'm sure the government's hoping for that. Regardless of how the government feels, it's just quite nice for the people out there to be... Excuse me. I did one quick example because I think it's quite impressive what happens if you essentially pay a bit extra off your mortgage. And as I say, when mortgage interest rates are dropping, you have the chance of doing it by just maintaining the old payments. So I just fed into the sorted mortgage calculator a $500,000 30-year loan at the current floating rate, and that person would be paying $1,330 a fortnight, and the total interest they pay on the whole loan is more than, so they've got a $500,000 loan, and they're paying that back plus $537,000 of interest. It's awful when you look at it like that. So you're paying back.
I advise you not to think about it.
Yeah, yes, or you'd never buy a house. Yeah. So you're paying more in interest than you do in actually repaying the loan. But so if in this particular example, if you pay $200 more a fortnight, so $100 more a week, your total interest that you pay on the whole loan would go down by more than 30%, which is huge. It would go down by $166,000, and that's real money. Is the point? People, it's all kind of there's all these numbers that people are putting on pieces of paper, but that's actually dollars in your pocket. So if you can increase your mortgage payments, or in this case, just not decrease them, you can end up saving a heck of a lot, and a really astonishing amount of money over the life of a mortgage. That is your money to do other nice things with. And what's more, in that particular example, you pay off the loan in 22 years instead of 30, which is, and once again, that might seem all a bit kind of theoretical, but it's actually that extra 8 years when you're, 50 instead of 58 when you pay off the loan, or 60 instead of 68 when you pay off the loan, suddenly you've got all this extra money you can...
Jeez, it must be an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
When you've been paying a mortgage your whole life, and then one day you've suddenly got all that money you were paying weekly.
You'll get there, Jesse. I promise. I promise. Look, it's a fabulous feeling, actually. You really feel free. You've got this house of yours that you actually own.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's good news. We like positive news, Mary. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Jess.
Yeah, and your thoughts or experiences are very welcome on 2101. 2101 if you've got thoughts on any of the issues raised by Mary today, and you can share what you're going through with your own mortgage.